Oh, you're here. Good. I've got another betrayal story for you. Sit down. Betrayal doesn't just hurt, it rots you from the inside out. The night I walked in on Emma and my father, I didn't just lose them. I lost a version of myself that still believed in trust. My name is Ryan. I was 20 years old. And back then, I thought I had everything figured out. Emma had been my girlfriend for nearly 2 years. Bright smile, quick wit, the kind of woman who made me believe in a future bigger than myself. And my father, Thomas, was the man I admired most. Everyone in our town respected him, sharp, confident, a businessman who seemed untouchable. Together, they were the two people I leaned on the most. My foundation, my safety net. At least, that's what I thought. It was Valentine's weekend. I had been working late shifts, saving money, and I wanted to surprise Emma with something simple but meaningful. Flowers, her favorite chocolates, and a cheap bottle of wine I knew she liked. Nothing grand, but it was for me. I remember grinning as I pulled into the driveway earlier than expected, my heart racing at the idea of seeing her face light up. She was supposed to be at my place. Waiting, I pushed the door open quietly, expecting to find her curled up on the couch with a blanket, maybe a movie running in the background. Instead, the first thing I noticed was laughter. Not just any laughter. My father's low, rolling laugh. A sound I'd heard at barbecues and business meetings, echoing across every childhood memory. And then hers, light and nervous, mixing with his. At first, my mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe Mom was there too. Maybe it was some family thing I had forgotten. But as I stepped deeper into the hallway, the voices got sharper. Words blurred, but the tone was unmistakable, teasing, intimate, wrong. My stomach twisted. I set the flowers on the counter, my hands suddenly slick with sweat. I turned the corner into the living room and froze. There they were, my father leaning back comfortably, Emma practically in his lap. Her hair was messy, his shirt half unbuttoned. Their faces snapped toward me at the sound of my footsteps, and for a second, all three of us were statues in some sick painting. My chest burned, my throat closed, and I swear I couldn't hear anything but the sound of my pulse slamming in my ears. "Ryan," Emma scrambled up, her voice sharp with panic. This isn't what it looks like." But it was. God, it was exactly what it looked like. I couldn't even get words out. My father, though, he didn't flinch. He didn't stutter. He just leaned forward, rested his elbows on his knees, looking at me like I was the one out of line. "You're young," he said, calm, even smug. "You don't understand how things work." That one sentence broke something in me. Not the cheating. That was already a knife in my chest. But his tone, like he had the right, like betraying his own son was just another business deal, just another move on a chessboard. Emma reached for me, tears welling in her eyes. "Ryan, please. I swear it just happened. I didn't mean. Didn't mean?" I snapped, my voice finally breaking free. "Didn't mean to end up in bed with my father?" She collapsed into sobs, but I couldn't even look at her. My eyes stayed locked on Thomas. My father, my blood, and he had nothing but a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, like he'd already won something. "You'll get over it," he said coldly. "Life doesn't always go how you plan." That was it. That was the nail in the coffin. I couldn't breathe, couldn't stand there another second. I turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. The flowers I bought, those cheap, hopeful flowers, were still sitting on the counter, forgotten. By the time I got to my car, I was shaking so violently I could barely put the keys in the ignition. My chest felt like it was caving in, rage and heartbreak twisting together until I couldn't tell which hurt more. All I knew was I had to get away, as far from them as possible. But fate wasn't finished twisting the knife. When I finally dragged myself home, my mother was waiting in the kitchen. Claire, sweet, steady Claire, who had stood by Thomas for over 2 decades. She looked at me, saw my face, and knew. She pressed me until I broke and spilled the truth, every ugly detail. I'll never forget the sound she made. It wasn't a scream, wasn't even words, just a hollow, broken sound, like someone gasping for air while drowning. She dropped into a chair, her hand over her mouth, eyes wide and empty. The betrayal didn't just crush me, it destroyed her too. The rest of that night was chaos. Mom confronted Dad when he finally walked to the door with Emma trailing behind him like some twisted prize. They argued, screamed, accusations bouncing off the walls. My mother sobbed, my father stood stone-faced, and Emma just clung to his arm, shame written all over her, but not enough to make her leave. That was the moment I realized I hadn't just lost my girlfriend. I had lost my father. And my family, the one thing I thought was unshakable, was gone in a single night. And no matter how much they thought time would dull it, I knew one thing. This was the night everything broke, and it was a night I swore I'd never forgive. The days after that night blurred into one long nightmare. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his laugh and her whisper. They became a loop in my head, a cruel soundtrack to everything I'd lost. The breakup with Emma wasn't quiet. It wasn't two people sitting down, agreeing to part ways. No, she made it public. Within a week, she was no longer my girlfriend. She was on my father's arm, showing up at restaurants and events like she had just been promoted instead of exposed. Photos started circulating online. Emma with Thomas at a charity gala, smiling, dressed to the nines. Her hand on his chest where mine used to rest. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation, broadcast for everyone to see. And people noticed. My phone buzzed nonstop with texts from friends who couldn't believe it. Some messages were sympathetic. Others were nosy, like they were just fishing for gossip. A couple of them even made jokes they thought were harmless. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Everywhere I went, it felt like eyes were on me, like people were whispering behind their hands. I had become the punchline to a twisted joke. The kid whose girlfriend left him for his dad. My mother, Claire, tried to hold herself together, but I could see her unraveling day by day. She barely ate. Her once neat hair became unkempt, her voice hoarse from crying. She had dedicated her life to that man, and he tossed her aside like yesterday's news. More than once, I woke in the middle of the night to hear muffled sobs coming from her room. Every time I walked in, she'd force a smile, insisting she was fine. She wasn't. And the worst part? She leaned on me for strength. Me, the son who was barely keeping himself upright. "Ryan," she whispered one night, gripping my hand like it was the only thing anchoring her. "We'll get through this, won't we?" I nodded, but the truth was I didn't know. I was drowning too. But if I didn't hold her up, she'd sink completely. Meanwhile, Thomas acted like none of it mattered. He walked around with Emma like she was a prize he had rightfully earned, smug and unashamed. He didn't care about the collapse of his marriage. He didn't care about the destruction he left in his wake. To him, life was still business as usual. If anything, he seemed more energized, like betrayal had given him a second wind. Seeing them together made my stomach churn. I couldn't understand how Emma could stand there, smiling after everything. Did she ever love me at all? Or had I just been a placeholder until someone with more money, more power, came along? Every time I spotted them, at the grocery store, at a diner, once even driving past me in his car, I felt the rage boiling in my veins. Thomas would glance at me with that same arrogant calm, as if daring me to challenge him. Emma always looked away, but by then, the damage was done. Friends I thought I could count on started keeping their distance. Not because they betrayed me, but because they didn't know how to act. What do you say to the guy whose girlfriend ran off with his father? Some pitied me, some avoided me, and some just pretended not to notice. Either way, I was left standing alone. And so I learned to stop looking outward for support. Instead, I turned inward. I stopped crying. I stopped begging for answers that would never come. Instead, I started watching, listening, remembering. I studied how Thomas moved, how he operated, where his flaws bled through. I listened when Emma tried to excuse herself to mutual friends, blaming timing or emotions, as if that erased what she had done. I burned it all into memory, because deep down, beneath the wreckage of my life, something harder was forming. I knew I couldn't forgive them. Not ever. But I also knew revenge couldn't be rushed. It had to be patient, sharp, and absolute. So that night, while the house echoed with my mother's quiet sobs, I made a silent vow. I would rebuild. I would outgrow the pain. And when the time was right, I wouldn't just hurt them the way they hurt me. I would take everything back and leave them with nothing. 3 months later, I had nothing left but a fire inside me. That fire became my fuel. The rage that used to paralyze me had hardened into something sharper. Discipline. I stopped asking why. Why Emma? Why my father? Why me? Those questions only kept me drowning. Instead, I forced myself to move, to work, to plan. I picked up a second job, stocking shelves at night after my daytime shifts at a hardware store. The money wasn't glamorous, but every paycheck I held in my hands felt like one step away from the ruins my father and Emma left me in. When my body screamed at me to quit, I reminded myself they thought I was weak. They thought I'd stay broken. That thought kept me going, but it wasn't enough to just earn money. I needed to learn how to make it grow. That's when I started sneaking into the library on my breaks, pulling books on finance, investments, and business management. At night, after work, I sat at my mother's kitchen table with a cheap laptop, devouring every article and tutorial I could find. While Emma was probably sipping wine beside my father, I was memorizing balance sheets and market patterns, my eyes bloodshot but burning with purpose. It was during one of those late nights that Mark, my best friend since high school, showed up. He tossed a burger bag onto the table and sat across from me, watching me scribble notes. "Man, you're killing yourself," he said. "I don't care," I muttered, not even looking up. "I'm not staying down." Mark didn't argue. He never pitted me. He just leaned back and said, "If you're serious about this, there's someone you need to meet. Gerald. He runs half the real estate in this town. He likes people who work harder than they should. And honestly, you're the hardest working wreck I've ever seen." I met Gerald 2 weeks later in his office, above a strip of old shops. He was in his late 50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. He didn't waste time on sympathy either. He just asked, "Why should I give a damn about you, kid?" I told him the truth. Because I've lost everything, and I want to build something no one can ever take from me again. Something in him shifted. He smirked, leaned back, and said, "Good. Desperation makes people dangerous. Let's see if you're smart enough to be dangerous in the right way." That was the start of it. Gerald didn't hand me money. He handed me knowledge, and just enough opportunity to test me. I started with small investments, ones that barely made a dent in his empire, but meant the world to me. When I made a profit, I didn't celebrate. I reinvested. Every dollar went back in. No vacations. No nights out. Just fuel for the fire. The win started small. A modest return here. A flip on a tiny property there. But each success chipped away at the image of me as the broken son of Thomas, the boy humiliated by Emma. I was building something they couldn't see yet. And that was the beauty of it. I was invisible, growing the shadows while they flaunted their sins in the spotlight. Meanwhile, Thomas was starting to show cracks. His arrogance, the same smug confidence he used when he told me I wouldn't understand how things worked, was eating away at him. He started pouring money into risky deals, throwing lavish dinners to prove he still held sway in the community. But I could see it. People were backing away. Whispers followed him. The same friends who once admired him were quietly shifting to distance themselves. One night, Gerald invited me to a networking event. I stood in the corner, quiet, listening. Thomas was there, of course. Emma clinging to his side in a designer dress that looked too expensive for the occasion. I watched as he boasted about a new project, demanding investment from men who once respected him, but their smiles were thin, their eyes calculating. They didn't believe him anymore. And in that moment, I felt a rush of clarity. I wasn't just learning. I was preparing. So I started keeping track. Every slip he made, every deal that didn't pan out, every creditor he brushed off. I kept it all documented, dates, amounts, connections. Like a surgeon preparing for an operation, I studied his weaknesses with precision. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch Emma's gaze across a room when our paths crossed. Her smile looked strained, her posture tight, like she wasn't as secure on Thomas's arm as she wanted people to believe. But I didn't care. She wasn't my concern anymore, not directly. My war wasn't with her. It was with both of them together. And wars are won through patience. By the end of that year, I wasn't just surviving. I was building. Quietly, methodically, and though they didn't know it. Every reckless move Thomas made, every ounce of arrogance he displayed, was another brick laid in the foundation of their downfall. I was no longer the broken son, the humiliated boyfriend. I was becoming something else entirely. And when the time came, I'd be ready to show them. By the second year, the balance had shifted. I was rising while Thomas was slipping. His empire wasn't crumbling all at once. It was rotting from the inside out. The same arrogance he'd used to betray me was poisoning his judgment in business. He started pouring money into projects that looked flashy on the surface, but bled cash underneath. A high-end restaurant in a dying neighborhood. A guaranteed real estate flip backed by men who had reputations for cutting corners. He borrowed heavily, trusting the wrong people, and each time he doubled down, convinced he could claw his way back. I knew because I was watching. I made sure of it. Gerald had contacts everywhere, and I used them like an information pipeline. Every deal Thomas touched, I tracked. Every loan he signed, I noted. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about precision, about timing. Emma wasn't glowing anymore either. At first, she walked beside him like she was the queen of something shiny and new, but the shine faded fast. By the second year, her smiles looked brittle. She wanted luxury, adoration, the kind of attention that came with being on the arm of a powerful man. Instead, she got whispered rumors about failing investments and an older partner more obsessed with salvaging his pride than cherishing her. I started hearing about their arguments. Gerald's contacts at restaurants, hotels, and even one of Thomas's business associates told me stories. Emma raised her voice, accusing him of ignoring her. Thomas snapped back, calling her ungrateful. Their fights weren't behind closed doors anymore. They were public, sharp, messy. Every time I heard one of those stories, a quiet satisfaction burned in my chest. The cracks weren't just financial, they were personal. Meanwhile, I kept building. I wasn't stupid enough to put my name on the properties I was buying. I created a shell company with Gerald's guidance, an entity that didn't trace back to me. Mark, my best friend, helped me disguise ownership. He signed paperwork, shuffled documents, and made sure that if Thomas ever went digging, he'd find nothing but shadows. I remember one night at Gerald's office, running my finger across a map laid out on the table. Red dots marked the properties I now owned. Small apartments, storefronts, old homes bought cheap and renovated just enough to triple their value. I wasn't a mogul yet, but I was more than the broken son they thought they'd left behind. I was becoming a threat they couldn't even see. Mark leaned against the wall, arms crossed, grinning. You realize he has no idea, right? Your dad could be standing on your property tomorrow and wouldn't even know it belongs to you. That's the point, I said, folding the map. The trap only works if he doesn't see it until it's too late. Claire saw the changes in me, too. At first, she was just proud that I'd picked myself up. She didn't understand all the details of business, but she could see the late nights, the tired eyes, the constant grind. Slowly, that gave her strength, too. She stopped crying at night. She started cooking again, smiling in little moments, finding pieces of herself that Thomas hadn't managed to destroy. One evening, She sat across from me at the kitchen table, sipping tea. "Ryan," she said softly, "your father thinks he's winning, but I can see it. He's not. You're stronger than him already." I wanted to tell her everything then, the properties, the shell company, the plan I was weaving, but I didn't. Not yet. I just smiled and said, "One day, Mom, you'll see." Her hand trembled as she reached for mine, but her grip was steady. That was the first night in years I saw real pride in her eyes instead of sorrow. Meanwhile, Thomas and Emma spiraled further. He was desperate to prove he still had control. She was desperate for the attention she used to get. They clashed, louder each time, in public places that only fueled the gossip. The man who once walked into every room with respect now dragged whispers behind him like chains. And through it all, I stayed quiet, invisible, patient. Every crack in their empire, every slip of control, every debt left unpaid, it all went into the ledger I was keeping. Because soon enough, that ledger wasn't just going to balance. It was going to break them. When Thomas staked everything on one last project, I knew the moment had come. It was a development deal, a glossy proposal for luxury condos on the edge of town. He pitched it like it was going to be his grand comeback, the deal that would silence the rumors and remind everyone he was still a man they used to respect. But I knew better. The land was unstable. The numbers didn't add up, and the partners he leaned on had reputations as sharks. To make it happen, Thomas borrowed heavily, more heavily than he ever had before. He put up everything, his reputation, his dwindling assets, even a family home. I didn't have to force him into the trap. He walked right into it. All I did was make sure the jaws snapped shut at the right time. Through Gerald's network, I traced every loan, every contract tied to the deal, and then I started moving quietly, invisibly, like smoke slipping through cracks. Shell companies, trusts, false names, all layers between me and him. Piece by piece, I bought his debt. The banks were happy to offload it. The partners were happier still to take their money and run. And in the end, without Thomas knowing, I became the hidden hand holding the strings of his entire future. By the time he signed the final paperwork, I already owned him. He just didn't know it yet. But fate wasn't finished serving me gifts. Around that same time, Emma started to crack. The woman who once strutted beside my father like a queen now looked restless, bitter, and hollow. The whispers about Thomas's failing empire had reached her, too, and the sparkle of being with a powerful man had dulled into something pathetic. And that's when she reached out to me. It started with a late-night text. Just one line. "I miss us. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time, heat rising in my chest. Every part of me wanted to throw the phone against the wall. But instead, I smiled. Because this wasn't just desperation, it was opportunity. So I played along. Not eagerly, not angrily. Just neutral. Short replies. A breadcrumb trail. Enough to let her think she might have a chance. But never enough to confirm it. That was the cruelest part for her. Hope. I let her believe, night after night, that maybe I still cared, that maybe I still thought about her the way she clearly still thought about me. Her messages grew longer, more emotional. She wrote about regret, about how things got complicated, about how she never meant to hurt me the way she did. She even sent me a photo once, nothing explicit, just her in the kitchen, hair tied back, trying to look casual. The caption read, "Wish things were different." Every word, every picture, every attempt at crawling back only fueled me. Because I knew what she didn't. Her desperation wasn't going to save her. It was going to expose her. Meanwhile, Thomas was busy convincing himself that his big project was untouchable. He hosted dinners, shook hands, and made speeches about the future of the city. He looked like a man reborn, even as the walls around him were already crumbling. I decided it was time. Time to end the game. Time to put them both exactly where I wanted them. So I set up a dinner. Invitations went out separately. To Thomas, it was framed as a meeting with a potential investor who could rescue his deal. To Emma, It was presented as a private dinner with me, a chance to finally talk. Both of them jumped at the opportunity, blinded by greed and desperation. Mark thought I was insane when I told him, "You're putting them in the same room at the same time." "Yes," I said calmly, "because this isn't about revenge anymore. It's about ending the story, and they need to hear it together." Gerald raised an eyebrow when I looped him in. "You've been patient," he said. "Don't let emotion ruin your precision now." "I won't," I promised, and I meant it. My heart was steady. My anger wasn't wild anymore. It was cold, sharp, and under control. The night of the dinner, I booked a private dining room at one of Gerald's restaurants. The kind of place with thick carpets, low lighting, and walls that kept secrets. A single long table stretched down the center, with space enough for all three of us. As I looked around the room before they arrived, I felt the strangest thing: calm. For 3 years, I had carried rage like a stone in my chest. But now, with the trap finally set, it felt lighter, because I knew by the end of the night, I wouldn't be the broken son anymore. I would be the one who broke them. The night of the dinner felt like the closing of a circle. I wasn't 20 anymore. I wasn't broken. I was 23, sharper, harder, and carrying 3 years of patience in my pocket, like a loaded gun. The private dining room glowed with soft amber light. A long, polished table stretched before me, empty for now, but in minutes, the ghost of my past would sit here in flesh and blood. I had taken my seat at the head, calm, steady, the documents laid neatly in a leather folder in front of me. Beside me, a second chair sat waiting. That seat wasn't for them, it was for Claire. She wasn't here yet, but she would be. I checked my watch. 7 p.m. sharp. The door opened first for Thomas. He entered with his usual posture. Straight shoulders, smug confidence, the kind of man who still thought the world bent to him. He was dressed for business. Crisp suit, shiny shoes, tie knotted perfectly. He didn't even notice me at first. His eyes scanned the room, expecting the investor he thought he was meeting. Then his gaze landed on me. For the first time in years, I saw him falter. "Ryan," he muttered, his brow furrowing. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands. "Evening, Dad. Sit down. We'll be starting soon." He didn't move right away. His jaw flexed, his eyes narrowing. "What is this?" Before I could answer, the door opened again. Emma stepped in, dressed to kill, black dress, hair styled, lips painted crimson. She carried a smile one she thought would melt me, but when she saw Thomas already standing there, her face drained of color. "Wait," her voice cracked. What is this?" "Take a seat, Emma," I said, gesturing to the table. "You're both exactly where you need to be." The two of them froze, caught in the trap before they even sat down. Emma clutched her purse like it was a lifeline, glancing between us. Thomas's jaw clenched, his nostrils flaring. But slowly, they moved to the table, sitting across from me. I let the silence drag for a long moment, just long enough for the unease to sink deep into their bones. Finally, Thomas snapped, "If this is some kind of stunt, Ryan, it won't work. I have important business to attend to." "You're right," I said evenly. "You do have business. In fact, your entire future is sitting right here on this table." I tapped the folder in front of me. "And unfortunately for you, I own it." He barked out a humorless laugh. "What the hell are you talking about?" I slid the folder open and fanned the documents across the table. Loan agreements, debt transfers, property titles. Each one stamped, signed, and very, very real. Every loan you've taken out for your precious development project, I bought them. Every debt you thought belonged to some faceless bank, they belong to me. And that house you put up as collateral, the one Mom still lives in, I own that too. You don't have a dime that isn't chained to me." Thomas's face drained. He picked up one of the contracts with trembling hands, scanning the signatures, the seals. His eyes darted to me. This isn't possible." "Oh, it's possible," I said coldly. While you were burning bridges and throwing money into bad deals, I was building. I worked, I invested, I learned. You told me I wouldn't understand how things worked, but I understand perfectly now. And the truth is, you don't own anything anymore. You belong to me. Emma's mouth fell open, her hand flying to her chest. Ryan, you can't be serious. Oh, I'm serious, I said, fixing her with a stare sharp enough to cut glass. But don't worry, I didn't forget about you. I reached for my phone, unlocked it, and with a few taps, the screen lit up with her late-night messages. I turned it toward Thomas, sliding it across the table. His eyes scanned the screen, widening with each line. I miss us. Wish things were different. Can we talk? And then the photo, the one she had sent in a moment of pathetic desperation. Emma, Thomas growled, his voice low and dangerous. What the hell is this? She stammered, her face flushing crimson. It's not what it looks like. I cut her off. Funny. That's the exact same thing you told me 3 years ago. You've run out of lines, Emma. Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, just the cold satisfaction of seeing the two of them crumble in front of me. The door opened softly, and Claire stepped in. My mother. She looked fragile still, but stronger than she had in years. She wore a simple dress, her hair neat, her face calm. When she saw me, she smiled. Then she walked past Thomas, without even glancing at him, and sat down beside me. Her hand slipped into mine under the table, warm and steady. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't broken. She was proud. Thomas's voice cracked, the mask finally slipping. Claire, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, she said, her voice sharp as steel. I understand that you destroyed this family, paraded around with her like some prize, and thought there would never be consequences. Well, Thomas, here they are. Emma broke then, her tears spilling. Ryan, please. I made a mistake. I never stopped loving you. I was stupid. I thought. I leaned forward, cutting her off with a whisper that landed like a blade. You thought the grass was greener. You thought my father's money would give you everything. And now you realize you lost the only person who ever truly cared for you. That's your punishment. Live with it. She sobbed openly now, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. Thomas, meanwhile, had turned red with fury, his hands clenched into fists. You think you've won, he spat. You think this makes you better than me? I stood slowly, towering over them at the head of the table. I don't need to be better than you, Dad. I just need to take everything back. And I did. On my signal. 2 men in black suits, Gerald Security, stepped in from a hall. They moved toward the table, firm and unyielding. Emma jolted upright, panic in her eyes. Wait, please. Thomas slammed his hand against the table, his voice booming. You can't do this to me. I'm your father. I leaned in close, my voice low but razor sharp. You stopped being my father the night you betrayed me. Tonight, you're just another man who lost everything. The guards guided them both out, Emma begging through sobs, Thomas cursing and shouting, his voice echoing down the hall until the door shut behind them. And then silence. I turned to Claire. She was crying, but these weren't the broken tears of a betrayed wife. These were tears of release, of relief. She squeezed my hand and whispered, You did it. I nodded, my chest rising with a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for 3 years. The fire inside me finally settled. I wasn't broken anymore. I was free. Hey, what would you have done if your own partner betrayed you with family? Do you think I went too far letting Emma think she had a chance again, or was that the perfect payback? Drop your take in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you're into stories where betrayal gets the justice it deserves, hit subscribe and stick around to the next one.